आराम करने की भी सुविधाएं हैं। स्वागत है हैप्पी जर्नी की रेस में।
That brings together technology, security, and global power that increasingly define how nations compete, cooperate, and protect their interests. This conversation is titled Cybertech, Space, and Geopolitics. We have with us our speakers for this session. Lieutenant General M. Unnikrishnan, Vivek, Johri, and Anirudh Suri would be guiding us through this important conversation. To begin, Lieutenant General M. Unnikrishnan Nair served PVSM, AVSM, SM retired, served in the Indian Army for nearly 4 decades, culminating as the Signal Officer-in-Chief. During his distinguished career, he held key operational staff and instructional appointments across the country. As a Lieutenant General, he was Commandant of the Military College of Telecommunications Engineering at Maho, Chief of Staff of the Army's Central Command, and Chief of Staff of India's frontline corps in Assam and Arunachal Pradesh. He also served as the ADG of Signal Intelligence, responsible for strategic intelligence gathering, and played a pivotal role in raising India's defense cyber agency. Sir, I request you to please join us on the dais with a big round of applause. While serving as a Signal Officer-in-Chief, he was appointed as India's third National Cybersecurity Coordinator at the National Security Council Secretariat, a position he held until May 2025. His work has spanned national cyber policy, telecom security, supply chain resilience, indigenization of electronics, and participation in APEX committees on 6G, the National Quantum Mission, and crypto regulations. Currently, he continues to engage with academia and industry and is a visiting faculty at IIT Gandhinagar. Joining him is Vivek Johri, a senior IPS officer of 1984 batch who retired as the Director General of Police, Madhya Pradesh. He has also served as Director General of the Border Security Force and a National Security Advisor to the Government of Mauritius. With long years of experience in intelligence and internal security, he brings deep expertise in counter-terrorism and bilateral and multilateral security issues involving India and its neighborhood, particularly Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives. His understanding of border security, both land and maritime, including the Indian Ocean region, adds a crucial strategic dimension to this discussion. Can we have a big round of applause for Officer Vivek Johri? Guiding this important conversation, we have with us Anirudh Suri, a leading voice at the intersection of technology and geopolitics. He is a non-resident scholar with Carnegie, India, where his research focuses on artificial intelligence, emerging technologies, and global power shifts. He is the author of The Great Tech Game, Shaping Geopolitics and the Destinies of Nations, and the host of the Great Tech Game podcast. Anirudh is also the managing partner at India Internet Fund, a technology-focused venture capital fund based in India and the United States. His professional journey includes work with the Government of India, McKinsey and Company, Goldman Sachs and Carnegie Endowment, and the China Institute of International Studies. He holds an MBA from Wharton School and an MPA from Harvard Kennedy School. Together, they all bring us the military experience, intelligence, expertise, and strategic technology insight to examine how cyberspace and outer space are becoming decisive of global competition. A big, big round of applause for all three of our speakers. And I request, ladies and gentlemen, to hear the important conversation on the very topic that we just discussed. Thank you very much.
No, thank you so much for the very kind and warm introductions. I must first thank both my fellow panelists and thank you for the national service that I think both of you have done over decades. So if I may request a quick round of applause, actually. No, no, please. For the lengthy, I think, careers you've had, both of you in, I think, areas that are critical for geopolitics. Many of us, I think, commentate and talk, but I think both of you, as I think many of us know, have done. Right? So thank you for that, and thank you to all of you who are here. The topic is, of course, something that Raghavji and I discussed, whether this is it's an emerging set of domains, cyber and space, that Raghavji insisted we must cover at the Bhopal Lit Fest as areas that might not be very mainstream in our mainstream discourse today, but must be, should be. And therefore, I'm especially delighted that we have really two stalwarts sitting to my left and right in these domains, both traditional and the emerging domains of security. So I hope we take full advantage of the time with them. What I'm going to do is we're going to try and cover 4 or 5 things which I'll give you a flavor of by mentioning a few things. I hope some of those things or incidents are familiar to you, but if they're not, I think during the course of our conversation, hopefully they'll become familiar to you. You might have seen news recently of the GPS spoofing at Delhi airport and some other airports across India recently. You might have heard of the American operation in Venezuela. What enabled that swift operation, I think, is something we will cover. Operation Sindoor, which we had a great panel on. Sir's here with us also, Master Akbaruddin. Great session yesterday. I think we touched upon the narrative wars that were very much part of Operation Sindoor. But the piece that maybe we didn't talk about in great detail yesterday, but hopefully we will today, is the cyber aspects of Operation Sindoor. As citizens, you might have heard recently Prime Minister Modi also highlighting the idea of digital arrests, how that's becoming a threat in our country, how citizens are getting affected by not just cyber attacks and hacking, but things as serious as digital arrests, and of course a lot of cyber scams. I personally have seen that in my family also. Proliferation of satellites in what is called the low Earth orbit. Unlike large satellites that we've always heard of in the context of ISRO and other space agencies like NASA, today there are small satellites being sent into the low Earth orbit. So not too far from Earth, low Earth, Elon Musk, SpaceX, these are names you've heard. Of course, many of you who travel will have heard of apps like DigiYatra. You might have heard of ransomware attacks, where companies' data, your data as individuals can be held to ransom. So unlike the kidnappings of yore, today there's ransomware attacks that can cripple systems, companies, databases, and your own mobile phones or computers, and you'll have to pay to get access back. These are some of the, I wanted to give you a flavor of the kinds of things that cyber and space domain today entail. And really what we'll try and do, what we've consciously discussed, is that while the topic of the session is cyber, space, and geopolitics, we're going to also talk about these two domains in the context of our daily lives, and not just how these two domains are today very critical for the space of geopolitics. We're going to try and do 3-4 things, if time permits. We're going to try and talk about, as I mentioned, the impact of these two domains on our lives. We're going to talk about the geopolitical landscape. Who are the key actors? Who are the key winners currently in terms of nation states? Who's leading in cyber? Who's leading in space? What it means for India? How is India faring? We're going to talk about big tech firms private tech firms and the role they play in these two domains. Unlike the traditional domains of warfare, the Navy, the Air Force, the Army, these two domains are much more dominated by private firms than they are, let's say, by um, government and armed forces, traditional armed forces. And of course, we'll try and talk about the idea of digital colonialism, about how all of this might play into a new form of colonialism potentially, in the form of a digital colonialism phenomenon. With that, I wanted to give you a flavor before we started. Um, but sir, if I could request you to maybe start us off with some broad remarks that you have on this topic, and then we'll proceed.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a very difficult panel I am stuck with two real-time experts sitting by my side. It was really difficult to frame the argument or discussion, but I have tried few points, and of course, as I have already told Mr. Suri that I have borrowed a lot of ideas from his wonderful book, which is about 3 years old now. So I will just give a broad points on what I think this subject of cybertech, space, and geopolitics is all about. Can we have the presentation, please? I will just stand, it will be better. No, I don't know. I don't want to see. Next slide, please. I will draw your attention to two statements, recent statements. One, President Trump, when he says about the lights of Caracas were largely turned off due to a certain expertise that we had. This was the hint which he gave how the operation was conducted. Then we have the Joint Chiefs Chair who said they began layering different effects. Now these two were a hint given by these two gentlemen about the use of cyber technology in the today, I won't say warfare, but in a way it was a war. But how geopolitics is using the cyber tech to force someone's decisions. Next slide, please. Then the clues emerged of this operation, the Venezuela operation. Internet Tracking Group reported a loss of internet connectivity in Caracas and same time as loss of power during the period in which American planes were about to enter Venezuela space. Then the China-made radar system, Russian-made air defense system were also reportedly disrupted so that the system in Venezuela, defense system, was rendered blind to the incoming onslaught. Next, please. Now, another explanation came from the Space Command of US. The spokesperson said that space-based capabilities such as positioning, navigation, and timing and satellite communication are foundational to all military activities. He was, of course, asked about the role of these things, Space Command in the Venezuela operation. He refused to give details. He just gave this statement, which is a sufficient hint what was going on. That it was a combination of military, Navy, Air Force, other intelligence, and also Space Command. Then we have another person, Joshua, who was the former senior director for cyber. And then he says that the Venezuela strikes demonstrate that the US is finally in a place where we can use cyber as a tool of national power. This is where the mixing of cyber power and geopolitics come. Next, please. Then our own Operation Sindoor, on which a lot of discussion has been taking place all over in this festival also. Now, what we saw in this particular Operation Sindoor, after it, how cyber warfare is a confirmed pattern now. Nowadays, wars are fought in cyberspace. It was an example of that. There were numerous attacks with the Advanced Persistent Threats APTs and hacktivists targeting critical infrastructure and government entities of India. So this was a very clear pattern emerging, and probably this will be the template for all future warfare. The threat actors reportedly used a mix of disturbed denial of service, DDoS, malware payloads, and website defacement to overwhelm the system and spread propaganda. This is what we faced in a big, big way during and after Operation Sindhu. Next, please. Now we come back to our topic, the cybertech, the space, and geopolitics. So, what are the geopolitical tools available to all of us? Traditionally, there were four of them major: Army, Navy, Air Force, Intelligence. They are the traditional tools. Now we are having new additions: cyberspace, outer space, and AI-enabled systems. All these get integrated now whenever there is a geopolitical move to be enforced by either by war or by other means. Next, please. Then there's a role of emerging technologies, as they are called collectively, which could be artificial intelligence, quantum computing, biotechnology. They are all reshaping the geopolitical landscape. Then the race to develop these and control these technology is tremendous now. And it is somewhere it is collaboration of like-minded powers, and somewhere it is competition like between US and China or Pakistan and India. You can have any set of players in competition now. So these have implications, whether it is economic competitiveness, national security, or global power dynamics. So my idea to project this was that the subject of geopolitics is totally intertwined now with the cybertech and also space. Next, please. Now, why it has become so important, cybertech in space? First of all, of course, it does not have any geographical boundary. So it's a open play area available to everyone, whether a small player, whether a big player, and you can have your own capacity development and develop these tools. Now, why it is important? Because it covers a lot of gamut of our daily life. Essential services, like I have listed, national security, economic impact. So whether it is use of GPS, whether it is weather, our emergency services, everywhere you find the interplay of these things. National security, as I've already indicated in the Venezuela operation, how a nation can be crippled using these set of tools. And then we have, of course, economic impact. It can affect your banking system, your financial system, can create huge losses, it can disrupt the services, deny the services to citizens, create panic. Everything is possible now. Next, please. Now, in this, how are we sort of standing and staring at the scenario? We have our own problems and a lot of problems. Few I have listed, whether it is the long land borders with very offensive neighbors, all three sides. We have our maritime interests, we have long maritime border, we have our interest in Indian Ocean region, we have our interest in Gulf, Bay of Bengal, and almost all important shipping lanes, we have our economic interest. Then there's a regional rivalry, which you all are aware. We have China, the biggest sort of entity next to us, and which we have to compete. We have to see how we can protect ourselves from these type of tools. Then the strategic autonomy, which we have practiced in last couple of years very, very firmly. Then how to protect that in this onslaught of technology, cyber, and even space-enabled systems. So that is what we have to be worried about. Of course, Operation Sindoor definitely demonstrated a lot of our capabilities by we were able to integrate a lot of system for our defense and also for the offense, for which our defense forces did a very, very commendable job. But as I have pointed out, there is a lot of open space, open field available in this, where the adversaries are moving ahead and we also have to keep the pace with them. Next. Now, I leave this forum open to the two experts on these questions. What lies ahead? That is the main thing. It's okay, we know that this has happened, that has happened, this development has taken place. The power of tools available to the various nations are now have increased manifold, but what lies ahead? First of all is a term digital colonialism. Now this term I have borrowed from Mr. Suri's book. He had in 2023 written about it, and he has opined that this is not going to happen. Why I have chosen to put a question mark here, it is inevitable or not, because whether Mr. Suri would like to revise his opinion 3 years down the line or more than 2 years down the line, because what we see today is a lot of digital dependence of each and every person and each and every nation. So this I leave it to Mr. Suri to comment upon. But this is one thing which is a future where we find ourselves totally constrained by constant monitoring, constant follow-up of our digital footprint. Then state versus big tech. The companies, the Google, Microsoft, all these companies are controlling international data now. Now, government has been asserting its own right to control these firms, and this fight has been going on since long now. Whether it will continue or whether a stalemate has been reached or whether a decision has been reached, either one of them has surrendered. This again, Mr. Suri is the expert to tell us. He has done a lot of work in this side. Technical dominance is driving geopolitical game. We all have seen how a country, if it is technological advance, can enforce its own decision, its own writ on a smaller nation. Venezuela is a classic example of that. Then the Cold War between US and China. Earlier it was USSR and US. Now it's a tech Cold War. It's no more the traditional Cold War of accumulating more and more nuclear weapons or other weapons. Now it is about technology. So that Cold War is also going on, and US of course is definitely way ahead in this war, but China is also catching up. So how do we see this and how this will take shape in future? This is what we need to deliberate. And of course, my last question is, among all this, particularly after the recent incident in Venezuela, is the rule-based world order at threat now? Will it survive? Will it grow? This is again something which need to think and deliberate upon. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Mr. Johri, for laying out, I think, both the landscape but also the key questions we need to discuss and deliberate upon. May I now request, before we go and address some of these questions in particular, may I now request General Nair to share some of your thoughts on how cyber, especially, you've had a great productive 2-year stint as the National Cybersecurity Coordinator for India, and what your thoughts on how cyber is, of course, shaping geopolitics, but also, more importantly, our lives.
Thank you, Anirudh. Mr. Vivek actually laid down the foundation of how cyber influences at strategic level. Extremely grateful to BLF for giving me an opportunity to interact with all of you. Firstly, I'll tell you as to how cyber involves us in our day-to-day lives. I'll give you a small little example of my name. I'm sure some of you would have read that it's M. Unnikrishnan Nair. Now that is my name, and I'm sure from the Nair, I'm sure you know that I come from which part of the country. Okay. Now you can also spell it as M.U. Nair, no, abridged form. Now when I applied for my Aadhaar card, PAN card, when we got commissioned, that was way back in 1984, like you also got into the government service at that point of time. Same year. When we had to apply for a PAN card. So M. Unnikrishnan Nair implied that I had to put after M a space. Also after Unnikrishnan I had to put a space. So it came to total 19 digits. So when I applied for my PAN card that time, there were only 16 slots which were there. I could not go beyond 16. So it became M. Unnikrishnan and I and R stayed, or last 3 digits AIR stayed outside. Okay, so I abridged it to MU Nair to fit it into that particular 16 slots. This is way back. When I applied for my passport, they told me that you can't put M there, it has to be expanded. So it became Madhavan Unnikrishnan. Madhavan is my father's name, like we do it in South. So it became longer. And add to the confusion, when I joined the army, when I applied for a SIM card, my assistant, he went and got that SIM card. He put my rank before my name. So it said Colonel, C-O-L-O-N-E-L. So imagine that I, as an individual, have so many identities. M. Unnikrishnan Nair, M.U. Nair, Madhavan Unnikrishnan Nair, and Colonel M.U. Nair, that time. Now, I'm sure you also would have faced similar things. So I have 4 digital identities in the ecosystem today. My PAN card says one, my passport says a different. Now, how is it being exploited by criminals? I'm sure there are criminals who use this by having different technologies to hoodwink the law enforcement. This is one example I give you, and it was forced on me. It is not intentional. I never wanted to, hamper anything in the society. But this is how the crime scene gets induced. First, second, that is my personal example. Now, second, I'll come to each of your households. Now, I'm sure all of you have smartphones. Everybody, literally everybody here would have had a smartphone. Have you ever looked at it saying that, okay, what is the country of origin of this smartphone? Have you ever looked at it? Okay, what is the operating system on this? I'm sure many of you would have either Apple phones or, iPhone, or you would have an Android phone which is there. Have you ever looked at it saying that, okay, what is the Android version which I have in my device? Is it Android 12, Android 13, Android 14, 15, 16? Have you ever looked at it? Now, are you aware as citizens that anything earlier than Android 12 is not supported by any security measures? So, if there are any vulnerabilities in this, the device manufacturer is not even responsible. And second, it could come from any of your adversary countries, like who have supply chain issues. So this is the second aspect of what happens in our houses. I'll give you one more example. You have modems in your houses. Now, where is the modems made? Do you ever look at it? Now, sitting here in India, I can actually today, there is technology available which can manipulate a modem in any part of the world today. It is possible today using the cyber technology which we have. And technology is changing so fast, there are software upgrades which are there to protect this. But in our homes, do we ever do a patch updation in our modems? So, how are we as citizens being influenced by cybercrime? Now, you mentioned about Prime Minister speaking about digital arrest. So all of us fall prey to such things because we as citizens are not aware of these intricacies which are there. I'll take you to another angle. Okay, I'm sure a lot of young people here, you look at social media, how does it influence you? Aren't decisions at home, in your homes, being made on what you see on social media today? I'm sure many of the elders here, their spouses tell them as to what drink to drink in the morning so that you reduce your weight, or your that cholesterol comes down. I'm sure all of you are aware of it. Doesn't it happen at homes? Yes, yes. So widely, what happens, and I'm sure many of the youngsters here, don't you make your decisions based on what you see on Myntra or any of these platforms which are there? So what I'm saying is your mind is set to what you see on social media. how is social media influencing your minds, your decision-making capability is based on what you see there. I'll give you a small example of one of my colleagues in uniform. He saw one of these examples and it was told to him that if you consume virgin coconut oil, it will be very good for health. So over 1 year, this person from Uttarakhand used to get virgin coconut oil from my state and drank it, and finally he landed up with a heart attack. Now, this is the implication of what you see and what you don't understand. So this is how social media or what you see on a device actually changes your lives. Okay. I talked about families. Now look at the larger ecosystem. I'm sure you're all aware of Google Translate. All of you have used it? Okay. So I relocated to my state after 45 years. I left Kerala at the age of 16 and went back when I was 61 after 45 years. So the day I reached, next day I saw the local newspaper in Malayalam, and it's very, there was a cloud burst in Uttarakhand which caused a lot of agony, and there was a major disaster. So the Google Translate translated cloud burst into make vispod. So it said make a vispodanam. So I'm sure many of you would understand, but there are, when I never knew of a word called make a vispod. What it did was it just translated cloud into make and burst into vispod. So that's how today the language which many of the youngsters here read is based on what is available on Google Translate. So you're actually learning a new language which is being thought of in English, and it's converted into colloquial language, or what you say, what you speak today is based on what you see on these translate platforms. So how is geopolitics got to do with this? Now, all these aspects which I mentioned are based on geopolitics. Where is Google hosted? Where is it actually housed in? Now, I'm not saying that it's for good or bad, but our lives as citizens are largely governed by what's happening outside, and that's how integrated today the cyberspace is with all of us here. You look at your own data. You have PAN, you have Aadhaar, you have so many other numbers, your birth date, your address, all of them today are on open media. They are all accessible online, and this is how these small little details of yours get exploited for criminal activities. I think Vivek mentioned about so many activities which are there. He mentioned about ransomware. How does the cyber criminals use this? They use your data. They can, I'm sure you must have heard of impersonalization, voice cloning. All this are tactics which are used against each of you here. And who are the cyber criminals? They could be your neighbor for that matter. They could be your classmate, or your fellow, person who's there with you, studying along with you. They could be larger gangs which are operating. They could be international players. It affects all of us as citizens. Now, you look at little larger entities. Look at industries. The cyber criminals also cause harm to them. You look at nations today. Nations also get impacted by cyber technology today, like he mentioned about Venezuelan power shutdown which took place. Similarly, industries can, their entire data, like what you, let's look at election commission. Their entire data can be encrypted, and you see the impact of it on our election scenario. So we need to protect not only the nation first, the industry first. You need to have cyber protection at each of your personal levels and also in your households. So that's what I just thought that I'll speak to you in my opening session.
No, thank you so much, General Nair. I think now we've had the benefit of the big picture of how cyber and space domains are being leveraged and are now intricately entwined with geopolitics, wars, conflicts, interventions, but also our personal lives. One thing I'll add there is, traditionally, we've all thought of war as having been fought on borders, our physical borders. So we have a border with Pakistan, we have a border with China. So We've traditionally thought that our wars will be fought on those borders, and our armed forces are typically aligned to those borders, the formations, etc. But now one of the implications of the proliferation of mobile technology and smartphones and the internet is that actually we've all unwillingly or willingly become part of a global warfare regime, right? And we must realize that all of us citizens, whether you're sitting in a Bhopal or a Trivandrum or Mizoram or Delhi or the border areas, you are now the remotest villages of India can today be impacted when they were not impacted by World War I, World War II. But today, any war, any conflict can very well come to your personal doorsteps, right? So I think that's one key implication that comes out from the remarks you've also made. I want to now jump back to the big picture, sir, if I may, on the cyber piece, and then we'll come to the space afterwards. On this cyber piece, we've seen the way it's being leveraged. You've talked about the dangers to us individually and precautions we need to take. But if you could help us lay out, your term. I'm sure you've coordinated and worked with the cyber arms of various countries. You've got a good idea of the landscape. Could you help us all understand how are the countries faring on the cyber domain? Different countries, including, of course, India.
Okay, as I mentioned to you, and as Mr. Vivek also mentioned, that it is agnostic to any boundaries. Cyber, it's a domain which touches every life, every citizen, every part of the nation, every part of the globe. So everybody in the world faces, and it's a reality, because we are going into a more and more digitally connected world. And these digital connections are only going to increase. At your homes, you look at your homes, out of, if you have 5 members, I'm sure there are at least 10 devices which are there today, including the ceiling fans which are connected. Okay, so that's where the ecosystem is, and I'm sure even the vacuum cleaners are, even the microwave ovens are, refrigerators, all of them are connected devices. How do you protect it? So every country has measures which have been adopted. There are organizations which monitor the entire cyber landscape. In our country too, we have the CERTIN, which looks at the entire landscape. We have a National Cyber Coordination Center which looks at the entire cyber domain to see if there are challenges or not. And we have every sector, let's look at the RBI, which looks at the financial sector, which creates regulations which are to protect your financial. I'm sure all of you are aware of UPI. Now you look at the enormity of the challenge, where the largest number of digital transactions in the world are carried out in our country today. So there are stringent guidelines which have been laid down by the RBI. There are similar measures which have been taken at the United States, France, China. All of them have similar measures which have been adopted. Now what's different in our country is that we have a large population, the largest in the world, who may not be digitally aware, educated, but they still handle these mobile devices. They still carry out UPI transactions. So we have people who can adapt to technology digitally all over India very, very successfully. And he mentioned about Op Sindoor and the implications in our country. We had the highest number of attacks, since we have the largest digital public infrastructure in the world. We are also the largest attacked from a cyber perspective. So we have an ecosystem which protects our entire cyber landscape to a large extent. Did any of you face any problems in UPI during Op Sindoor? Let's be very honest here. Did you even realize that there was? So this is the success of our robust cyber ecosystem which is there. No, we don't concede that. But our cyber warriors, the chief information security officers, the people who are working on cyber security were doing their job very well. And that's one of the reasons why we are protected. Similarly, there are organizations, and when there are organizations which fail to protect them, and that's when disaster strikes, like what was mentioned in Venezuela probably, they didn't look at cyber as a form of threat. So we need to look at the entire cyber landscape as part of a national security. So many states today have realized this, and they have ecosystems which have been created to look at the entire cyber landscape, to make it sure that it is part of the national security ecosystem. It is there across the world. You look at any of the top developed nations, they all look at cyber domain as something which they need to protect, and it's integral to the national security. So also in India. So it's very well frameworked in our country, and I think we all as citizens need to be aware of it, that we have a very good system in our country.
So if I may also add on the space dimension in the interest of time, the role of private sectors in the space domain. I'll get right to it in the interest of time. You've seen Elon Musk, SpaceX be key players in Ukraine. You've seen the usage of space and low Earth satellites even in Ops Sindoor. How is India placed on the space domain? Of course, we've had a long tradition of ISRO doing space research, but from a national security standpoint, which has not been necessarily the primary focus for ISRO, how are we placed as India on the space domain, as space, low Earth orbit satellites get used for surveillance, of course to drive precision strikes they get used. How are we placed on the space domain as India?
Okay, I'm sure all of you are aware as citizens that we have the ISRO, the Indian Space Research Organization, which is driving our efforts towards our developments, progress in space sector till about a few years back. So from 2023, we had the space sector being opened up, and we have the space sector now available for private sector to participate in, and it's been a wonderful measure. Look at the GPS. I'm sure all of you are aware of GPS, which actually guides your navigation when you use your smartphone. We are also attempting to have a similar indigenous development called the NAVIC, which will be there on your devices, which will be a completely indigenous system. For communications, for your presently our communications is based on optical fiber, terrestrial media, which is there. That is landline-based communication system. Can you make it into a satellite system? I'm sure you must have heard about satellite communications, which the low Earth satellites, you require about 6,000 satellites to provide connectivity from space. Now, we are also looking at similar measures. It will take a long time for us to reach that, but today the United States and China have capabilities. They also have GPS equivalents, like there is a system called the Beidou, which the Chinese operates. We are building up on the NAVIC. I'm sure these will add value, and opening up the private sector would look at better launch capabilities, better satellite infrastructure, space capabilities, and this is a domain full of opportunities for many of these youngsters to participate in for future.
I'll share one statistic here for the benefit of the audience. There's today about 10,000 odd satellites up in orbit. Can I ask anyone to guess how many India has up in orbit out of that 10,000? 5,000 out of 10,000 you think are Indian? How many do you think SpaceX has up in orbit? 1,000. So I'll give you the rough numbers. Yeah, so SpaceX has over 3,500 out of the 10,000. 35%. So over 35%. I think that number increasing every day. So might be even closer to 4,000. China has about 350 to 400. The US government has 300. So see the contrast between a private space firm today and the US government, right? India has about 150, right? That's the glaring gap we are seeing now in capabilities. I wanted to share that statistic because as space gets leveraged, both for commercial users, but you'll increasingly see space will get leveraged for warfare, intelligence, surveillance. There's a massive gap in capabilities. I'll give you an example very close to Bhopal. Last year I was in Kana, very close to here. And in Kana, one of the activities they were doing at the resort was stargazing. And it's an amazing thing. The person who was helping us had an app to identify constellations and satellites. So star constellations and satellites. And in the satellites in this app, you can see SpaceX satellite number XYZ. And I can't tell you this, but it's amazing. You were seeing more satellites passing by every literally second. That was SpaceX satellites. So I want to leave you with that on the space piece. I know we are very short on time and I want to open it up.
I would like to ask one question here. Is it not the time for our government to start thinking in terms of more private partnership in whether it is technology or whether it is space? Is it not the time now?
So I mean, if you'd ask me, I think it's absolutely the time. As the statistic I showed you on space shows, that today the capabilities in these emerging domains, especially, lies largely in the private sector. You had asked me a question, so I'll briefly address it. When I wrote my book about 2-3 years ago, when it came out, I had a chapter in it that said the tug of war, big tech firms versus states. It has changed dramatically. Today, if I was to write that chapter, as we were discussing, I'd write the nexus between big tech firms and states. It's no longer a tug of war between them. They have aligned very much. With that, actually, let me just open it up for questions, if that's okay.
Yes, the floor is open for questions
May I
now.
ask, we spoke about the public-private partnerships or the relationship between, preponderance of private satellites in space versus government-owned satellites and so on. Legally and effectively, General Nair, this is a question for you. Are we Do we envisage a scenario where the government can take over any private sector initiative without any resistance? So, for instance, if the US government tomorrow were to sort of requisition and take into its control and command all of Elon Musk's satellites, could they just with one fiat, like they've done for Venezuela or something, could they just do it through military use or through just an effective government order being issued that we're taking over and use them effectively, turn them around for defense purposes and strategic use? Or will that have to be forced?
I think when we look at infrastructure, be it public, be it private, anytime there is a national emergency, I'm sure these will be used for national security, and that is built into every system, every contract. So if there are space players who are there, space infrastructure created by private agencies which are indigenous, I'm sure they'll be legally bound to provide support to the requirements of the state during crises.
And a small corollary to that, sorry, I'm taking over everybody's time. Is it technically possible for the state to quickly, take control and run those systems despite their encryptions and coding, etc.?
They will require the support of the team which is there, because they are completely private at that point of time. So they need to have a team which is supporting them, but they can always be taken over and it can be done.
I can add one real world example. I will not name the country, but it has happened very recently when there was a system which was being used for technical monitoring of internet and other things, built up by a private company. It was taken over by the government, and for about 8 months, government was not able to wake up from the sleep because they didn't have the code. So what Lieutenant General Saab has said, that you have to have that company fellow there. Government on its own, it's very difficult.
But I'll add one thing. So as you know, I run this podcast and I asked this very question to a US-based space expert, and he mentioned that they have already inbuilt wartime contracts with these firms. So if the need arises, how will the arrangement work is already being planned for.
Hello, my name is Swasti Srivastav and I want to ask,
How old are you?
I'm 14.
Very nice.
So I want to ask is it possible that in the future cyber weapons may be classified as weapons of mass destruction, because even though they might not directly cause harm to human life, they can severely cripple economies and critical infrastructure of many nations that they may not be able to recover from in the future.
Great question.
Wow.
So
Excellent.
like every technology has a positive and a negative use. You look at fire, which we use. Can't fire which we use at home be used for destructive purposes. So every technology has a negative and a positive use. How you use it is depending on the citizens, the nation as a whole. Okay, so if cyber technology has to be used for destructive purposes, we can definitely use it, and so also for positive. But for national good, for well-being of citizens, it's better that we use such technology for the well-being of citizens. And that's how we should use technology for. There are miscreants who misuse technology. I think the law enforcement agencies to be chasing them up, and they need to be growing in strength to look at these issues. But no, there will always be a challenge at your young age between privacy and security. This balance is something which every nation will have to understand and negotiate. And there are judicial interventions, there are legal steps which every nation has coined to protect your privacy, and you can always go to court. But understand that a nation will only survive if the security of the nation is protected. And there are, and even if there are privacy concerns, I think a nation should always come first. That's my point of view.
And from an international perspective, if I may add, your question is at the core of why countries are not coming together and signing a cyber security treaty. No one wants to agree to certain rules of the road because everyone wants to exploit this technology to the extent that they want when they need to, right? So while we have a nuclear proliferation treaty, etc., today for nuclear weapons, we don't for cyber, precisely for the reason I think you've asked that question. So great question. I'm very happy that you've asked that. A quick round of applause for you. Very heartening to see that. I think there was a question in the...
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Nipun Bajpayee. What exactly I wanted to ask was that there was a terrorist attack, I think back 8-10 years ago, and exactly the iPhone company hadn't given, due to privacy versus security, they hadn't encrypted the phone.
That's correct.
So exactly, sir, like we are asking about the likes of personality traits like Trump and Musk, and the person, an individual private entity has too much power. So I don't know, like you are mentioning that they have war crime context, they are way ahead of their time, but what India can do, at least preemptively, because there has to be some sort of regulatory mechanism, or what we can do to control these sort of things, because एक private व्यक्ति के हाथ में इतनी ज़्यादा
Absolutely, sir. Question is, how can the Indian government or India control or regulate the actions and decisions of foreign tech firms who are so powerful?
See, this is a tug of war, as has been pointed out. The technology is advancing too far, and when the government make a regulation, then at times we find the regulation is falling short of the development which technology is taking place. Then again we have to go for revising the regulation. You can have regulation to control this, there is no doubt on that. But the problem is only this, that regulation once made may not be sufficient even 2 years forward. So there is a constant sort of race between the government regulation and the development technological happening in the private sector. That will go on, but be assured that government has the upper hand to control these things in some way.
Anything in that?
I think he's answered this.
Okay.
With respect to everyone, actually I work in IT space. I work in governance, risk and compliance, and I might have heard Mr. Nair in one of the ET event. So ETC, so event and
Sir,
all.
please introduce yourself.
My name is Mahendra Palia. I work in Tech Mahindra. I work in cybersecurity these days. Sir, we touched upon the current statistics and situation. What I was considering here, there are on ground there are a lot of challenges in terms of digital arrest. I was going through a news, and last month there was an IPS who lost around 8 CR, and
That's correct.
right. So that robust mechanism somewhere way kind of what is the government intention towards the on ground reality? Phishing is always there, digital arrest is always
The
there.
question, what is the government,
Is
how is the government planning to
yes,
work on these
I mean
on-ground
government
challenges?
officials and intellectuals are facing all those things day in day out, and we see even this morning I was going through some news in Bhopal newspaper, and then we got some traceability how the the money is being deposited in other
If I
accounts.
may ask, sorry, the question is? What is the
I
question,
mean,
please? What can the government do?
how exactly we are trying to secure? See, India is being considered as consumer for all. Maybe for social media or and all. We have lot of consumers or users for cyberspace. So the worry factor is after long we are going to have a data privacy act in India. So my thought process is how we can make or a kind of government is making a framework to for a secure cyberspace for
Secure citizens in the
yes,
digital
yes,
space.
yes.
Correct.
Okay, just to answer your question in short, there are a number of, you mentioned about DPDP Act which is going to come up and which will be effective from next year, from March, measures to protect your data, personal data. But I mentioned to you as every component of cyber landscape in which you are also a member also have certain responsibilities. So I think as citizens, we need to be aware of what are my responsibilities as citizens insofar as cyber domain is concerned, digital domain is concerned, what should be done, what should not be done. That is one. As a society, we should know how the social media can impact you. And third, the government has to regulate it. There are cyber security laws which can be done, but it should not impinge on data privacy, etc., for which there are separate governing bodies which are there coming up. Okay. But I said for national security, any domain which has been exploited, I think we need to keep it as a national security issue, and privacy should not override it. That's my point.
Yeah, if I may.
Okay, actually
last
we are
question from
running
the-
out of time.
We'll take one question from the lady. Yeah.
We'll take one more question.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Zehra Gohar. So, my question is how the privacy concerns be implemented?
That's a great question.
Okay,
Very
so
complex.
if you go through the DPDP Act, there is a data privacy board which is going to be, I think it is called the DPB. I'm not sure about the abbreviation, but there is a data privacy board which is going to be created, and every organization, every structure which is coming up will have clear-cut rules which are there. Like what is your responsibility as an individual? There are organizations which are going to host data. What are their responsibilities and what's the government's responsibility? So clear-cut, you could go through the DPDP provisions. Just for an academic interest, you must go through. You'll realize that all this has been thought through.
And I'll add that the right to privacy has been enshrined as a fundamental right by the Supreme Court through a decision, I think in 2017. So because of it being enshrined within our fundamental rights, a lot more institutional structures are now going to come in to protect that right as privacy. But let's also be honest, it's a very complex question, very hard. And given the trade-offs with national security, I think it's a thing that we'll have to continually struggle with. Citizens will need to keep wanting to defend their privacy and rights. And I think the state will want access where it's needed for national security. So I think that's again a thing to be managed over time.
Thank you
think
so
with
much,
that-
sir. If you're having any questions, you can have the conversation outside. This session reminded us that geopolitics today is no longer shaped only by geography or diplomacy, but increasingly by code, data, satellites, and invisible networks. A heartfelt round of applause once again for our speakers and moderator for a conversation that was both timely and deeply insightful. To honor our distinguished guests, I would now like to invite Reema Ahuja ma'am, a founding member of the Society for Culture and Environment, along with Mr. Raghav Chandra sir, Director of Bhopal Literature Festival, to join us on stage to present a token of our gratitude.
Yes. We thought frontal attack is better.
This is not merely a memento. We are privileged to share with you a genuine piece of our history. This is the special BLF 2026 memento. The legendary Padma Shri Durga Bai created this artwork specifically for BLF 2026. It depicts little Gorlaya, a story of devotion, a tiny bird loved by Bhangsu. It's transformed by the tribal god Buradev into a beautiful maiden.
We have an ISRO center, by the way, in Bhopal. Huh? Yes. You know that? I said it.
Thank you to our speakers for sharing their perspectives, and thank you to the audience for your attentive presence.